There is a very specific way jealousy reveals itself in human relationships, but most people never recognize it while it is happening, because real jealousy rarely looks like hatred. It does not announce itself openly. It hides inside concern, inside subtle criticism, inside emotional distance that appears without explanation. You feel the energy shift whenever certain people see you growing, succeeding, becoming more confident, more fulfilled. Conversations begin feeling different. Support starts sounding conditional. A strange tension quietly enters the relationship, yet nothing obvious has happened. And because the behavior is indirect, most people spend months, sometimes years, trying to understand what changed. According to Carl Jung, this confusion exists because envy operates through the shadow, the hidden part of the psyche, where insecurity, resentment, inferiority, and suppressed desire continue shaping human behavior outside conscious awareness. And in this video, we are going to explore 7 psychological patterns jealous people consistently display, along with the hidden mechanism underneath each one that explains why these behaviors are often so difficult to recognize in the moment. Because once you understand the patterns, you stop being confused by people's behavior. You begin seeing the psychology behind it clearly. Carl Jung believed that the most dangerous emotions inside human beings are usually the ones hidden beneath awareness. The shadow is not simply darkness. It is every insecurity a person never confronted, every fear they suppressed, every weakness they denied, every desire they buried because accepting it would threaten the image they built of themselves. And jealousy becomes especially dangerous because it rarely feels like jealousy to the person experiencing it. Instead, it disguises itself as realism, as honesty, as concern, as emotional withdrawal that feels justified. The jealous individual usually believes their own explanation for their behavior because the shadow protects itself by remaining hidden even from the person carrying it. Your confidence reminds them of their fear. Your success reminds them of their stagnation. Your growth forces them to confront the painful possibility that they abandoned parts of themselves long ago. And because the ego cannot comfortably tolerate feelings of inferiority, the psyche unconsciously transforms envy into behaviors that feel socially acceptable on the surface. This is why jealousy becomes so psychologically confusing. The person receiving the behavior senses tension but cannot explain it clearly. Meanwhile, the person expressing it often feels completely justified in everything they are doing. Now let's discuss the patterns. Pattern 1. They quietly minimize your success the moment you share it. This is one of the clearest signs of hidden envy, because it allows someone to emotionally reduce your achievement while still appearing supportive on the surface. The pattern is subtle but incredibly consistent. You share something meaningful, something you worked hard for, something that genuinely matters to you, and within moments a qualifier quietly appears beside it. Maybe the timing helped. Maybe the opportunity was easier than people realize. Maybe you just got lucky. Maybe anyone in your position could have achieved the same result. Notice how they rarely deny your success directly. That would feel too obvious. Instead, they psychologically shrink the emotional weight of the achievement until it no longer feels as impressive as it did when you first shared it. Jung understood that human beings unconsciously organize themselves through comparison systems running beneath awareness. The mind constantly measures status, progress, attractiveness, and success against the people around us. And when someone nearby begins evolving in ways that highlight another person's insecurities, the ego experiences threat. Rather than consciously admitting feelings of inferiority, the psyche protects itself by minimizing your accomplishment emotionally. If your success can be reframed as ordinary or circumstantial, then the painful gap between where you are and where they are suddenly feels easier for their identity to tolerate. The minimization is not really about your achievement. It is about protecting their self-image from comparison. Pattern 2. They slowly become emotionally distant when your life starts improving. This withdrawal rarely happens dramatically. Usually there is no argument, no betrayal, no visible conflict. Instead, warmth quietly disappears from the relationship over time. Conversations become colder. Responses become shorter. Enthusiasm fades. Support begins feeling forced rather than natural. And what makes this pattern especially revealing is the timing. The emotional distance appears precisely when your confidence, success, or visibility begin increasing beyond the emotional reality they feel comfortable around. Jung described projection as one of the shadow's most powerful defense mechanisms. When people cannot consciously face certain insecurities within themselves, they unconsciously project the discomfort outward instead of recognizing it internally. Your growth awakens unresolved fears inside them. Your confidence forces them to confront the risks they never took. Your success reminds them of abandoned ambitions they buried long ago. But instead of experiencing the discomfort as something happening inside themselves, the psyche experiences your presence itself as emotionally uncomfortable. Suddenly they feel off around you without understanding why. And because they cannot identify the true psychological source of their discomfort, emotional distance becomes the easiest escape from the comparison your existence now creates inside them. To you, it feels like someone disappearing without explanation. To them, it feels like a vague emotional reaction they cannot fully understand. Pattern 3. They absorb your ideas, your identity, or your energy while refusing to acknowledge your influence. At first, this behavior feels subtle enough to dismiss. But over time, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Your language appears through them. Your perspective gets repeated. Your style, your approach, your creativity slowly mirrored in ways that feel strangely familiar. Yet your role as the source disappears entirely. Healthy admiration naturally gives recognition. Emotionally secure people can openly admit when they learn something valuable from another person. But unconscious envy struggles to do this because acknowledging your influence would require admitting that you possessed qualities they lacked. So instead, the psyche attempts to absorb what it secretly admires while emotionally erasing the discomfort of giving you credit. Jung believed shadow behavior often contains hidden admiration buried beneath resentment. The jealous person envies the very qualities they deeply wish they possessed themselves, and because they cannot consciously integrate that contradiction, they unconsciously imitate what they refuse to openly respect. This creates one of the strangest emotional experiences in human relationships, watching someone quietly borrow your light while pretending they created it themselves. Pattern 4. They subtly influence how other people perceive you when you are not around, rarely through direct attacks, rarely through obvious hostility. Instead, it happens through implication, suggestion, and carefully planted doubt disguised as concern. A small comment, a skeptical question, a subtle observation that sounds harmless in isolation but slowly changes how people emotionally interpret your character, your motives, or your success. Human beings do not experience reality objectively. They experience reality through narrative. The story people believe about you shapes how they interpret everything else afterward. And jealous individuals instinctively understand this psychological truth even when operating unconsciously. So rather than confronting you directly, they quietly influence the emotional atmosphere surrounding your name in spaces where you are absent. What makes this behavior especially dangerous is that the person often experiences it as morally justified. The shadow disguises sabotage as honesty. They genuinely believe they are being realistic, cautious, or protective. This is why confronting jealous individuals directly rarely produces clarity. You are not simply arguing against conscious manipulation. You are confronting a defense system specifically designed to hide its true motives from awareness itself. Pattern 5. They become increasingly critical the moment your success becomes visible. When you were uncertain, struggling, or invisible, they had very little to say about your choices. But once momentum begins entering your life, criticism suddenly appears with surprising intensity. Now they have concerns about your methods, your attitude, your decisions, your direction. And what makes this psychologically effective is that the criticism often contains fragments of truth. Completely false criticism is easy to dismiss, but criticism mixed with partial truth creates confusion powerful enough to weaken confidence. At a deeper psychological level, this behavior is connected to what psychologists call social leveling instincts. Human groups unconsciously resist individuals whose rapid growth disrupts the emotional balance of the collective. Your success silently forces others to confront uncomfortable questions about their own inaction, fear, or lack of growth. And rather than elevating themselves, some people unconsciously attempt to reduce your momentum, so the emotional comparison becomes easier to tolerate. The criticism intensifies because your progress intensifies the pressure their ego feels around you. And the more visible your evolution becomes, the more aggressively certain people search for flaws capable of emotionally shrinking it. Pattern 6. They slowly rewrite the history of what you built together. This pattern becomes especially painful because it alters shared memory itself. Over time, your contribution begins shrinking in the retelling. Your effort becomes less visible. Your role becomes smaller. Ideas that originated with you are suddenly remembered as collective accidents rather than personal creation. And according to modern psychology, memory is not a perfect recording system. Human memory is emotionally reconstructive. The brain reshapes the past according to current emotional needs and identity structures. Jung understood that the ego will unconsciously distort reality before allowing itself to experience unbearable inferiority. So, people affected by shadow envy often begin genuinely remembering events differently, not always because they are consciously lying, but because their psyche has reorganized the story in a way that protects self-image. This is why arguing with jealous people about the past often becomes emotionally exhausting. You are not debating facts alone. You are confronting a psychological survival mechanism defending identity itself. The mind edits memory to preserve emotional comfort even when the truth quietly disappears in the process. Pattern 7. They become strangely energized by your struggles. This is perhaps the most uncomfortable pattern to recognize because it rarely appears openly. The person may still sound supportive, they may still perform sympathy, but there is a subtle emotional shift in the quality of their attention whenever something goes wrong for you. A deeper curiosity, a stronger engagement, an energy that feels more alive during your suffering than during your victories. Jung referred to this as the shadow's hidden satisfaction. When someone carries unconscious envy toward another person, that person's success becomes an ongoing psychological threat to the ego. Every achievement intensifies the painful comparison happening beneath awareness. But when the successful person experiences failure, embarrassment, or hardship, the emotional pressure temporarily softens, the comparison stabilizes, the threat decreases, and beneath the surface, the shadow experiences relief. Most people hide this reaction quickly beneath concern, but emotionally aware individuals can still sense it. They feel the strange emotional atmosphere surrounding certain people during moments of pain, and once you recognize this pattern clearly, it becomes impossible to ignore, because genuine support feels different. Genuine care does not become emotionally energized by your collapse. What ties all 7 of these patterns together is one uncomfortable truth Carl Jung repeatedly returned to throughout his work on the shadow. The most influential forces shaping human behavior are often completely unconscious. Jealousy at this level is not always a deliberate strategy. It is frequently an automatic defense mechanism protecting fragile identity structures from painful emotional comparison. This is why many jealous people genuinely believe their behavior is reasonable. They believe the criticism is honesty. They believe the distance is justified. They believe the subtle sabotage is concern. The shadow disguises